Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking with ex-BigLaw recruiter Sadie Jones about some networking nuts and bolts, everything you need to know to feel comfortable mingling with strangers. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan, that's me, and typically I'm here with Lee Burgess. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so that you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. Together, we're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we would love to hear from you. With that, let's get started. Welcome back. Today we're talking with ex-BigLaw recruiter Sadie Jones about everything you need to know to feel comfortable when you're mingling with strangers. So welcome, Sadie.
Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure. Well, why are we even talking about this? I mean, nobody sometimes tells you these really basic things about how to feel comfortable in what is generally a rather uncomfortable social situation. So let's jump on in. Well, first off, why is it intimidating to go to a networking cocktail party and something along those lines?
Well, I think it's a situation that you don't normally find yourself in and that you may not have experience in depending on where you are in law school or your life, your career. And first of all, you're dealing with strangers, people you don't know and you might feel intimidated by. You're holding food and drinks and maybe a bag and maybe you have a name tag and you're kind of juggling different things. You may be dealing with people who are really different than you, who are older, who are younger, who have different life experiences, and, maybe are more or less comfortable at these things. And so you may just sort of be unsure about what to do.
Yeah, I think all of that is right. I mean, the idea that you're just going to suddenly show up to this thing, you're going to be carrying your wine glass in one hand, you're going to have your plate in another, you're trying to shake hands, you're trying to pass out your card, you're mingling with, old white dudes, son, these are not people you might normally interact with. And it's just kind of unclear, what are you even supposed to be getting out of this? What are your goals here? Are you supposed to make a new best friend? Are you going to get a job? What is this even about? So I think it's pretty typical for people to be intimidated, even if, you're somebody who, relatively speaking, feels comfortable among strangers. This is a pretty weird setup.
Definitely. I think it's just kind of different than what you're normally used to. And so I think it's kind of good to think about it ahead of time, because you normally wouldn't maybe go into a social situation and kind of think about what you're going to do ahead of time. So that's why I say, give it a try and kind of, map it out a little.
I think that's right. I mean, even for me, I'm pretty decently social, but I definitely recall kind of having to get my game down for how I was going to handle these things, these parties. And we did a lot of them as in our first year of law school. The second semester, firms would come on campus, I think once a week, and they would have free food and free drinks. And the idea was you could kind of go there and practice. And even then it's less intimidating because a lot of the people were your classmates, but at least it let you practice kind of, what are you going to do? So let's talk through some common scenarios that people are probably going to encounter that if you've thought about, you'll probably end up making a better impression. So first off, let's talk about the best ways to enter and leave a group conversation gracefully, because this can be pretty hard.
I agree. I think it's hard no matter what. And even if you know the people, sometimes it's awkward. If I'm talking about some don'ts, maybe, I wouldn't kind of sneak into the conversation and just kind of hide there. I think it's better to sort of, you can kind of stand there and then when you see the right, moment, either introduce yourself or maybe say something, that you hear them talking about that makes sense for you to add. I think it's kind of weird if you just sort of stand there, and just kind of don't participate, but be there. I think it just that feels awkward to me in terms of getting into a conversation.
Yeah, and I think here sometimes I've heard it described like the best way to look for a group that is receptive to someone joining them is to look for someone who's shaped more like a horseshoe than a circle. So, if you have a closed circle of, say, 4 or 5 people who are talking intensely about something, that can be a really hard group to break into. Whereas if you have, sort of like 3 people, it's more of a triangle. You can kind of ease your way in at the edge of the square. Or if it's a larger group, but they've kind of left an opening, which is always a nice thing to do if you are in a group, is kind of leave a space where somebody could join you. Because I think you're right. I mean, if a group is in a tight circle and you're kind of hovering behind them, not really saying or doing anything and not really asserting yourself to get into it, at some point, it's just sort of like, okay, who is this weird person, like, not really joining the group?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I also think you don't necessarily have to join a whole group. Sometimes you'll be, getting some food or drink or whatever, and you see someone standing there and you can kind of start your own conversation.
Yeah, I think making your own group is always a great option. My pro tip on this is if you station yourself, if you come in alone and you look around, you don't really see anybody that you immediately recognize or that you want to talk to, I always head in that scenario either towards the bar or towards the food, preferably the food. And, there are plenty of people coming through solo at that point because everyone's kind of making a beeline for that. And then you can be the one who is friendly and make some random comment typically about the food, like, oh, have you tried these? They look really good. It doesn't have to be rocket science. And then, you
Definitely.
can start chatting with that person, and then you guys have your own group. So I think things along those lines, or if you're in line at the bar, that's always a good opportunity, turn to the people around you, like, oh, what are you guys going to be ordering? This doesn't have to be complicated.
And I think this is also a time, especially if you're starting a new group, to think about sort of your body language, what you're giving off. And I know generally people don't like this, but you should try to smile. Like, I'm not telling you
friendly.
To smile. I'm saying that it makes you look more open. Not have your arms crossed, things that I think people basically know. But I do think that some of those things are unconscious and you don't realize you're doing them. So kind of think about what you're going to do if you're like not sure what to do with your hands or, not sure what face you can practice that a little bit. Sort of how would you stand there? How do you look open and approachable?
Right, exactly. You want to look like you're receptive to someone speaking to you, not totally like arms across, like scowling at the world. I mean, you can do that if you want, but you're not going to make too many new friends at a cocktail party.
Definitely. So I would say, try to be as relaxed as you can or appear relaxed.
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind, too, if you're the one who's going to be kind of forming your new group, is everybody is feeling uncomfortable, and you don't really have to be that outgoing for somebody to be happy that you've spoken to them. The average person is, if you say anything, is going to respond favorably because they don't want to have to be the one to start the conversation.
Definitely. So I think if you kind of take the initiative here and do some of these things, I think you'd be really pleased with the results.
Yeah. And sometimes people find it helpful too to go with a friend, which is fine for kind of the training wheels. But I think you do at some point have to jump in the deep end and really go out on your own.
Definitely. I was going to say, and I think it's okay maybe to start with someone but you're not really going to get much out of just hanging out with your friends or whoever it is, a professor, somebody that you already, know and have spoken to. That's not really going to help you in terms of meeting new people or networking or kind of putting yourself out there. So this is a situation where you should push yourself.
Yeah, that always happens when Lee and I go to our co-working space. We just go and talk to each other. And I'm sure if we went alone, we would probably have met way more people by now.
Maybe you should push yourself next time to not sit together.
Yeah, but we're going there to have a meeting, so it's fine. And I don't really, honestly, it's like one of those things where I'm like, I'm not really here to network, actually. So it's cool. Like, again, kind of know what your goals are.
Exactly. That makes sense.
All right, well, let's talk about how to leave a group conversation, because sometimes this can get really awkward. Like, say that you are in a group and they're just not, the conversation is boring to you, or you feel like you've been there long enough, you want to talk to some other people. How do you get out of the situation?
Well, again, I'm just going to start with my what not to do, because I see it a lot, which is just sometimes people just stand there and maybe the conversation ends or there's a lull and they just leave. And it's like they don't say anything. There's no sort of closure. There's no, it was nice talking to you. I feel like there are certain phrases you can use to get out of it, or you can say, oh, I'm going to go, talk to this person, or, oh, I'm going to refill my drink, or whatever it is. I think there are certain phrases that you can use that can help you here, but I don't think like sneaking off is great in the same way that sneaking in isn't great either.
Yeah, exactly. Like you want to be just straightforward, be a grown up about it. Hi, it was so, thanks so much. I really enjoyed talking with all of you guys. I'm just going to go refresh my drink and maybe we'll meet up again later. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be like, oh, and then I'm doing this and that. It's just like, okay, great meeting all of you guys. Let's keep in touch. It's kind of like yearbook signing.
Exactly.
You have your standard phrase you just say over and over. Okay, so yeah, I think these are really important things to think about though, because you don't want to leave a bad last impression and you don't want to make a bad first impression. So if you are not totally comfortable, in these scenarios, have a plan and practice it. You can also try out different phrases. You can split test, see which ones are more, better received and less well received. So that eventually it just becomes second nature and you do not have to think about this.
And you might need to practice it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like you might need to write it down or say it in your head or kind of, have some things in your back pocket that you can go to. I think that's a good idea because I think some people sort of panic and don't know what they're going to say, and then it's awkward.
Yeah, and I think when you're entering a group, assuming it's a smallish group, it's always nice to introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Alison. I'm a law student, at whatever school. Doesn't have to be a big thing, but just kind of give people a little bit of background.
Definitely. And I think that students might be surprised at how few people do any of the things that we're talking about.
Right. I mean, these all seem, I guess, pretty obvious. But yeah, the next party you're at, look around and see how many people in your group are actually like behaving like polite people would. Often it's pretty low.
Exactly.
All right. This is another huge area where people really get tripped up. And it can be kind of challenging. So again, this seems, stupidly basic, but let's talk about how to handle your food and drink plates, your cups, your bags, things like that, and still be able to shake hands with people.
Okay, that's hard. I think this is actually a really hard area that people don't think about that much. I do like those plates that have kind of a hole where you can put the drink in, because then you can really hold it in one hand. And I do think a lot of places are doing that now. But not everyone is. So if you have that situation, you can kind of hold the tray and your drink in one hand and be okay, and then still shake hands. But generally, I would say you kind of can't just have all of your hands full at the same time, and that the priority at these events shouldn't necessarily be making sure that you got all the food you wanted and drank all the drinks you want. I think you sort of need to be smart about it. And yes, you can eat something and drink something, but that shouldn't be sort of like where you're focused at any moment. I feel like you should have a free hand.
Yeah.
You can just put your drink or your food down and say, shake your hand. Like hopefully there's a table or somewhere to put it. I would say though, think about it ahead of time if you're like constantly doing that. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, this is a scenario where your priority needs to be able to shake hands with people, hand out your business card. I suggest having your business cards in an easy to reach area. So put them in a pocket or something, rather than just having to dig them out of your bag and your business card holder and all that. Make it very easy with one touch that you can reach in your pocket, get your card, hand it to someone. If they're high top tables, that can be a good idea for setting things down on, but absolutely. I mean, get yourself a snack or two so you're not getting too lightheaded, but your priority has to be, having that free hand that you can do something with. I mean, it is possible if you're really careful to balance, say, a wine glass and put it on your plate, or but then you've got your napkin, and it just gets really complicated. And you might have something you're going to spill. And I agree, there are certain people who are really good at this, but I think most people aren't. And then it kind of feels weird for the other person because they're not sure what to do. And also, I was going to say, in terms of what you said about being lightheaded, I actually feel like you should
go to one of these events where you're like starting from that situation.
Right.
And I understand sometimes you can't help it. You had a really busy day. You were running from something else. I get that.
Have a granola bar.
Generally, I would say you should have like had a snack, had some water, gotten hydrated before you go, so that you're going from like a comfortable place.
I agree. I mean, this is the place where a kind bar, that you're eating on the subway or something on the way can really make a big difference. You don't want to show up ravenously hungry. There may or may not be tons of food. But, I think it's totally fair. Again, like you can position yourself by the food, have your 5 minutes of eating, put your plate down, grab a drink. And, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to drink. We've talked about this before. Just don't make a big deal out of it. If you're not drinking alcohol, just get something else. It's fine. No one cares. But, a wine glass or like a cocktail glass is typically pretty easy to handle. And then you can still do all the other things with your hand.
And I think as we've talked before also, if you are drinking alcohol, I feel like one drink. And you can refill it with water.
Yeah, have your white wine or something. I don't recommend red wine in case you spill it. I don't even like white wine, but if I go to one of these events, that's what I drink because if it gets spilled, it's less of a big deal. And also, I don't want to have to dry clean everything.
Red wine can kind of stain your teeth or your lips. Yeah, you don't want anything that's going to look weird.
Yeah, you end up with that weird like purple lip, purple teeth thing, purple tongue. If you're going to drink red wine, bring a toothbrush, go to the bathroom, brush your teeth afterwards. Mm-hmm. Probably not even worth it. Just have white wine. The wine is not the point of these. So I think
that's the moral of all of this.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not the point of it.
Yeah, the point is that you need to be handing out business cards and things like that. Which you should also have. If you don't have them, get some made. You can go to Zazzle, you can go to Moo, you can go to your school, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just have something.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be expensive.
No.
And like you said, have it in a place where you can easily, get it out. Because you're not going to be like handing around your resume or something.
No, I think the goal here is like if someone who wants to contact you or you want to contact them and follow up, you need to exchange information. So have the ability to do that. Let's continue.
And have somewhere that you're keeping business cards too, along the same line.
Right. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit later about how to follow up. But definitely don't just like throw them away. That would be kind of pointless. All right. Well, let's continue on the food theme since this is something that trips people up. How about when you're at a reception and they're having like those passed food trays? Somebody's very, very fancy. Somebody's serving them off the tray. But what that ends up generating oftentimes is like trash. So there may be, a little cup holder that has on it or like a little skewer. And is it okay just to kind of flag the person down from across the room if you see something you really want? You're like, oh, I loved those shrimp. Like, let me yell at the person.
I'm going to go back to what we said before, which is that the food just shouldn't be the priority. So I don't think you should flag someone down. I know a lot of times with past hors d'oeuvres, you just miss them or you miss what you wanted. And that's okay. You can just let it go. If they are somewhere where it's accessible or it's easy to talk to them, I think that's fine. I do think that it can be hard when it comes on a skewer or has, like you said, kind of a lot to it. I probably wouldn't even do that unless I was sort of near a table or had a, something where I could put it on, because you don't want to just be like throwing trash. Someone might see you.
Yeah. Or like, you're going to put the skewer in your bag. Like that also looks weird.
Yeah. There's so many ways to get tripped up here that again, I think, just get things that seem easy and that you can eat, easily. Like, I think like crackers and cheese or, all of those kind of little things are usually easy and they don't involve, any kind of waste or anything. So I would say it's okay if you missed the food you really wanted.
I know. I've seen sometimes people will station themselves by the door where the people are coming out and like just stand there and try to get first dibs. That is not a productive use of a networking party. Sorry. Even if the shrimp are really amazing.
Also someone might notice.
Right.
Like
of course.
Somebody might be like, oh, that was the person that was like hogging all the, the shrimp. Right. Or like the nice thing.
Oh yeah. If you station yourself by the door and every time they come out, you take like 4 of something, I guarantee you someone who in charge of this event is going to notice that.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have seen people do things like that. So I would just say, I know free food is really appealing, and that is the reason a lot of people, go to things, but that shouldn't be the reason. And, that's not going to help you long term.
Yeah, just be reasonable here. All right. Well, what if you're in a group or even one-on-one? Probably this is actually a worse scenario when you're stuck one-on-one. So sometimes you'll find yourself in like a one-on-one conversation with someone and that person is being a total bore. And maybe they're saying things that are inappropriate. Maybe you're just uncomfortable. Maybe you just don't want to talk to them anymore. How can you get away from them?
Well, I think you can get away from them kind of in the same way that we talked about how to get out of group. So nice to chat with you. I'm going to go, like we said, refill this. I need to go talk to blah, blah, blah. I think you can come up with some kind of list of excuses to have in your back pocket. And what I say is they might be awkward. Like maybe this person's hard to talk to and maybe they don't know how to get out of it or they're saying bad things or they're drunk or whatever it is. But you try to be, the best you can be and be as appropriate and polite, and have good manners about it and just excuse yourself.
Yeah, I think this is a scenario where you just have to be polite but firm, because sometimes if you say, it's been great talking with you, I'm just going to pop over there and refill my drink. Oh, I'll go to the bar with you. So if you really want to get away from someone.
And that's why I think it's okay. Yeah, I think it's okay then to sort of walk away.
Yeah, I think it's fine to just be like, it was really great meeting you. I have this very important thing I need to attend to elsewhere. Or,
exactly.
Like I'm just going to pop on into the restroom or I need to go make a phone call. Something that requires that you go by yourself is probably going to be your best option here.
Absolutely. I think that's a good point.
All right. Well, let's move on. We're getting short on time here. What are some good and bad topics to talk about in a scenario like this?
Well, don't talk about anything controversial. So I wouldn't be talking about politics, religion, anything that seems divisive and that you don't know how the other person feels about it. I would just stay off. I think there's lots of neutral topics. You can talk about, something going on in the world, like, I don't know, pop culture or there
Women's
was an
World
award
Cup
show or some sports team just won something.
Yeah, anyone is aware, for example, right now, the Women's World Cup is going on. Do they have any interest in soccer? Maybe not. But you can be like, have you caught any games?
Yeah. And then if they did it and it doesn't go anywhere, just like pick a different topic.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Or you could say what you were watching.
Yeah, I saw the France, I saw the last 20 minutes of the France game the other day. Really interesting. Went to overtime. Oh, what else are you interested in these days? Yeah, I agree. Just keep it light, keep it simple, have kind of stuff in your back pocket. If it comes down to it, you can always talk about the weather. People are like weirdly interested in that wherever you are in the world, anytime. There's always something to talk about the weather. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too rainy, it's too sunny, it's too whatever.
Yeah, and I do find particularly older people really like to talk about the weather.
Yeah.
So if you are networking with sort of a different generation, I think that's always a good topic.
Oh, yeah, you can always ask those people what they're doing for the summer, too, because I guarantee you they have exciting plans. Like, we're going to be spending some time in the Hamptons or jetting off to St. Bart's. Their vacations, always a good...
That sounds lovely.
Yeah, always a good thing to talk to law firm partners about, like what their vacation plans are, because even though they work a lot, they probably have some fancy vacation that they would just love to tell you about.
Yeah, I think that's the thing to remember here, too, is that people like to talk about themselves, and you can give them a little bit of room. They'll be talking about themselves, and they will leave that conversation thinking you had a great conversation with them,
exactly.
Even though they were just talking about themselves.
Yeah, and if you're at an event with lawyers, and it's really that kind of event, I think just asking them, what kind of work they do, they're all workaholics, so they love to talk about themselves and their work. That can easily make them think that you are a great conversationalist, and all you have to do is, oh, that sounds interesting. Yeah, and how did that hearing go? It's not really not that difficult.
And I think if it's an event at your law school, and let's say it's an alum event, I think people tend to be interested if there's something kind of going on new at campus or with the professor. Nothing controversial, again, but there's a new building. I don't know, but I do think people sort of get nostalgic and stuff, and they like that.
Oh, and again, they love to talk about what it was like when they were there. You know, I was at Columbia Law School, so and in many of these conversations with lawyers who were trained there in the 70s, you know, were about, wow, how much the neighborhood has changed. Oh, yeah, there used to be a crack house right here. You know? So, yeah, they're like, you have no idea, like, what it used to be like. Like, oh, really? Okay. And then, you know, again, they think you're a great conversationalist when you've said basically nothing.
Yep, I think that's all correct when we're talking about lawyers generally.
Yeah, exactly. They just really like to hear themselves talk. All right, let's shift topics very briefly before we wrap up. So we've been talking about networking, cocktail parties, that type of thing. What about some dinner table basics? Like, I know sometimes people can be very intimidated if they get invited to a formal dinner and they sit down and they see all these forks and they see all these plates and they see all these cups and they see the, you know, all the stuff. What's like the 2-minute version of what to do here?
Well, my quick version of kind of, you know, utensils and plates and that kind of thing are you're starting from the outside in. So, you know, like your appetizer or salad or whatever forks are kind of could be on like the end, and then you're going to move in to, you know, your entree. And it's kind of the same thing, you know, if there's multiple plates, usually like the plate on top is going to be the plate that you start with. I also think that sometimes people get intimidated by this and that generally other people don't notice it as much as you think you notice it. And, you know, unless it's something really crazy, like I'll bring up an old reference to Pretty Woman, where she like flings something across the restaurant. But generally, I think that no one is really going to notice if you use like the too small fork versus the other one.
Yeah, and if you do, frankly, the waiter is probably going to come and switch it out for you for the next course anyway. Yeah. So, like, they will probably notice, but that's their job and no one else cares. I think the only place you can really get tripped up where other people will notice is if you use the wrong bread plate or take the wrong water. Mm-hmm. But even then, if it's like a crowded table, it's not really obvious which one is yours and you do take the wrong one, at some point someone will probably be like, oh, wait, where's my bread plate? And someone will pass them an extra one and it's fine.
I also think if you're not totally sure, maybe you wait and just see what everyone else is doing first to kind of look.
And sometimes you'll see like a partner. Yeah, sometimes the partner will take the wrong one and then everyone else just pretends that they're supposed to have the one beside of them on the wrong side because that's just what you do in these scenarios.
Yeah, and that's a good lesson probably.
Yeah, but generally speaking, I think, you know, you sit down, you have kind of your area, typically your water and stuff is going to be like on the right, your bread plate, I think it's on the left. You know, it's usually pretty separate. It's only when the table gets really crowded that you might not be able to tell like what belongs to you.
Definitely. But, you know, put your napkin in your lap.
Exactly. Sit down, put your napkin in your lap. I would say wait for everything else at that point. You know, they might come and ask you what type of wine you want. If you don't want any, again, just don't make it a big deal. Like, oh, you know, nothing, or let them fill the glass and then don't drink it. Like, it really doesn't matter. Keep in mind, though, they will keep refilling. So if you're going to start drinking, you've got to be careful because that glass is going to be constantly refilled.
That's a very good point. And I think that's right, a situation where you drink more than you expected to because you didn't realize that they were continually refilling it. So maybe don't keep, you know, drinking out of it. Or, you know, if you see them, you can kind of put your hand over it or something.
Just be like, cut me off, basically. But yeah, outside in is really your rule of thumb for any of these dinner table things. And beyond that, not a whole lot to worry about. Just do what other people do.
Yeah. The one thing I'd add that I think we've talked about before is not to order things that are really messy or hard to eat.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that in terms of lunch, but obviously it applies to dinner as well. Ribs, you know, there's lots of things that are particularly messy, you know, and so I would pick something you feel like it's going to be simple.
Agreed. Always a good idea. Make it easy on yourself.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're almost out of time here, but one last question. How can or should people follow up with the people they meet at these events, since that is sort of the point?
Well, like I said before, I think you should, you know, make sure you're keeping any business cards or contact information that you get in one place so you can, you know, see it later. And then I think after you take those out, maybe you make a list. Maybe you make a Trello board or an Excel chart or something with who the people were. And then, you know, I would say send them an email and say it was great to meet you at say what event it was. And if you had an especially good conversation about a particular topic, you can bring that up so they sort of remember who you are. Because I think keep in mind that they might not know who you are. And then, you can maybe say like, it would be great to get coffee and talk more about something. You don't necessarily need to ask for something, but I think it's nice to kind of reference your conversation and kind of put it out there that, you remembered them and that kind of thing.
I think that's right. And you can even make notes during the event, not when you're with other people, but this is a great opportunity. If you're in the restroom or something, you can, and you've gotten a business card, make a quick note on there about why you want to follow up with this person, or you can take a picture of it with your phone in case you lose it, send it to yourself, put it on a Trello board, and then again, make a note about what you want to say to them. Because you might think that you're going to remember at the end of the night all of those 8 people that you talked to and exactly what you spoke to them about, but they're probably going to start to run together.
Yeah, and I was going to say what I sort of say about thank you notes is the same thing I'd say about this follow-up, is that I would be really careful and, like you said, take notes, and that if there's any confusion or doubt in your mind that you're talking about the right person, I'd say don't say it, because it would be way worse, I think, to confuse them with somebody else or make a mistake in that way than to not have followed up at all.
Yeah, better to keep it totally neutral than to say, I really enjoyed talking with you about whatever, and they're like, I never talked to you about that. Who is this person?
Yeah, that happens a lot.
It does. I just got an email today from someone wanting to guest post on my website and then putting it in a completely different URL, to which I responded, actually, no thank you. Like, we are not even the website that you're spamming with this information, so bye. It just makes you look way worse than if you just...
That's the perfect example.
Yeah, but like, that's not even my website. And you also email me at this email address that doesn't match the email that you put. It was just very weird. So people do notice.
It's good you told them.
I mean, I really just did it to be passive aggressive, but whatever. All right. Well, with that, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. For more career help and the opportunity to work one-on-one with us, you can check out careerdicta.com. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app, because we'd really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee and Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.